Sup Shredders, my name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reacts, where today we got ourselves a track from an actor named David Peoples titled Pageantry of a Sunflower Field. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on YouTube. Now, apparently this is not their first release. They've got an extensive background apparently in jazz as well as production, so it'll be good to check out more. We're going to listen through this track from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's do it, let's go. Therese Riego, dancer, Danielle Kuntz, harp and composer, and then David R. Peoples, composer and electronics. Nice. Good to know who's involved. Wow. That's a hell of a buzz, isn't it? I love those color responses. Okay. Okay, so I think I understand this track, and I do quite like it, and we're going to talk about it more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named David Peoples, featuring Therese Riego as the dancer and Danielle Kuntz as the harp and composer. This track titled Pageantry of a Sunflower Field. In this section, we're going to provide an overall song analysis of everything from lyrics and vocals all the way through to studio production, as well as any applicable constructive critique. And then finally, my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But before I go any further, what do we think this track is about? I would assume, just given the journey we go in terms of the audiovisual component of it, with the dancer representing, I think, what the music is trying to communicate, which I think is, first of all, that's a really neat idea. I understand it's not the first time it's been done, but it's just very rare nowadays that you get such both a literal attendance to the music from the visual imagery, whilst also such a really, it's almost like it comes together at the end. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, you can follow along for the sunflower waking up at the morning, and then there being lots of knocking and things going on, maybe during the daytime when people are doing things, you know, maybe there's like big happenings around them, you know, it's like, people doing construction work around the sunflowers or something like that. That big bang is suddenly a burst of energy or an intensity in terms of our surroundings, what's occurring as things kind of grow there. It's almost like we are celebrating the fact that life is as vibrant as it is the best we can, regardless of how much control we have around our surroundings. Then as we get to the end of the piece there, we kind of come back down again to our final stretches in tow with the last sort of glissandos of the harp, I suppose, and then we come to a standstill. The track has this natural bell curve, which I appreciate over time, and I think that the ballet dancer, Therese, does a fantastic job of communicating both their interpretation and a more accessible understanding of the piece. It's like a celebration in different stages, the beauty of the different sunflowers, you know, like different levels of sunflower, but ultimately all of them going to sleep afterwards to start a new day. It could also be the sunflowers maybe coming up from the ground and that darkness, that big kind of crescendo there, bush, and then the sunflowers blossom, and then you can see all of them at the end. Maybe the sunflower petals go down at the end as they pass to the next stage. I'm not quite sure, but either way, there's different ways of, you know, understanding it. And I think the fact that I'm wanting to interact with it is a positive thing, especially given that it's an instrumental with explicitly no context outside of what you're seeing and what you're hearing. So with that understanding that there are no vocals, again, we're just relying on the instrumental accompaniments, especially if we do not have the video in front of us. And at 5 minutes 39, it is a long song. It is outside of the 2 to 4 minute sweet spot, where if it's more than 4 minutes, you really need adjustment of the variety of the different progressions, the flow, rhythmic cadences. You need different segments of the track in order for it not to be too samey. Otherwise, unless of course there is some sort of lead on top which is changing or engaging enough for you to want to stick through it regardless. And with this, I mean, the dominant layer is the harp, and you have that from the start, and you have the harp in varying forms, speeds and pitches until the end. I just want to first of all emphasize there is a phenomenal dynamic range to this, and it is so incredible how we explore that. So there are some moments where it is so explicitly like low-key and tender there that you're really personally quite involved in trying to understand why that is. It brings it down enough for you to go, man, why are we doing this? Why are we so subtle? But other times, again, before that big burst there, it just becomes overwhelming, and almost because of the difference between the quiets and louds, you're left in a position where you're kind of dumbfounded by it. You're like, oh my goodness, what's going on now, you know? And there are these waves and oscillations and adjustments of the volume and presence of it as we go through the piece as well, which I appreciate primarily because it gives it life. It's more sort of attentive to the fact that growth isn't just a linear thing. It goes up a little bit and up a little bit, and effectively, you know, it's just nice. And there's this kind of ambivalent or ambiguous tonality to these arpeggios that are being performed by the harp player, the harpist, I suppose. And we go, and it's a very technically proficient performance. We clearly understand how to play the instrument remarkably well. But we have these occasional bits of dissonance there, these twangs like bow, which adds a kind of a grounded, sort of less pretty tone to almost insinuate there's more than meets the eye, you know, alongside the clack clack kind of percussive sounds we have in that midsection there. It's like a tail end. It's a call and response almost to the growth we're trying to have, letting us know that eventually we will have to come back down. But there are moments such as around 205 part where there's just like these pads and ambient layers in the background as well there, where they almost sound like they're trying to indicate a sense of foreboding or tension there. They're just in existence outside of that main lead element there that you need to be aware of, even if the harp is the main focal point. And that part where around the 2-minute 40 part where we have the reverse takes there, and we almost sort of like synthesize it, or you know, we make it a bit more sort of digital there with a kind of flurry of how things kind of wrap and warp together before it blacks out, and then we grow from there. It's just so cool to have more of a percussive feel through the plucking, then for it to kind of become a bit sort of jagged and mutated before we get back into our familiar context and understand, oh, this is just the next stage now. And I think we also pitch shift, if I'm not mistaken, certain parts of the harp as we go through it in a way that almost makes it sound a bit sort of lo-fi. And I dig the fact that we're not making the appearance of it too blunt and traditional here, that we're affecting the way it sounds to give less of an even, clean tone to work well alongside some of the reverse takes that we had prior. But yeah, there's moments of just quiet hitting, such as around the 435 mark there. And I think if it had just been the harp by itself, it would have been fine. But when you, again, have those kind of buzzy sounds like at the start there, which is like a cello or some sort of string instrument in the low end there, a deliberately less beautiful tone and contrast, or those hits which were not trying to add to the melody put forward by the harps. I think that where we understand that nuance is what it helps to create, at the very least, more intrigue within the piece from a listener's perspective. It might make it less accessible, but I think it's nonetheless more interesting. It's just cool to, again, as I mentioned prior, to have the ballet dancer, Therese, I think, to have them pay really close attention to what the harp is doing and be able to sort of swing with that and really kind of have a sense of chemistry and connection across all the elements within this. Even if it's just singular movements, da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum, with the arms at the end, it's really cool. And I think just as a closing note, or at least in terms of the thematics of it, thematically, I think it was in the F sharp major or the G flat major. And I like that key signature because of how the major tone works alongside the idea of a pageantry, you know, like a grand display of the sunflowers there. That's supposed to be a happy thing, right? Whenever those kind of chromaticisms or darker tonalities from some of those B flat notes, for example, come in, or you have a sense of darkness because they're different from the major. So it's very blunt when it's trying to communicate a different sort of perspective, but ultimately it resolves back to that kind of like really comfortable, peaceful texture to let you know that even if there are some dissonances, things are going to be okay. It's more the speed and pace of it which dictates the growth of the sunflowers themselves. But I like that, again, we're able to incorporate a mixture, more the diatonics within the major, as well as the different colorations with the other instruments there to give these tracks more specificity with the roles of things, as opposed to trying to do too much work with one instrument. It gives these different parts of the song, these different ingredients, more like characters, so to speak. You know, makes it's better, I think, for storytelling in that regard. And so, you know, in studio recording, mixing and mastering, I just think generally things have been mixed incredibly well. There's a phenomenal amount of dynamic range, you know, difference between quiets and louds there. I like how things are spread around the stereo field. I think the use of the bang or the foley or the kind of buzzy strings or the synth pads and stuff, the way they were leveled within the frequency spectrum within their relative pitches and niches there was good. There were no sort of like moments of discomfort that weren't able to be explained from a compositional perspective. And I just love the fact that we had room for it to breathe. It wasn't overproduced. I don't think it was missing anything instrumentally. And it's nice and loud, but a pump and bus compression limiting is handled. It just had so much life to it, which I think is part of the point of it. No applicable constructive critique for me, and from a final general listener's perspective, this has probably been one of the more unique tracks that I've listened to throughout 2026 so far, but I'm glad that I've had the chance to listen to it. And given that it's not often I hear music like this, I would sincerely like to check out more. I believe that there's more room in the industry for music like this for people who want to tell stories differently, and I wish everyone all the best in future with their musical endeavors. Because thank you for watching my review of this track from David Peoples titled Pageantry of a Sunflower Field, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via the various social medias and the YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe. And please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as you need to help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.